Now, what did you expect clicking on a Zinniop video about gender? I'm Master Inkheart, and I wrote this video during Pride Month, so today we'll be discussing transgender words, loan words with different genders between languages, or more generally, how gender is assigned to loan words. And yes, I know trans people don't change their gender, but I think if gender is a spectrum, it's not unreasonable to assume people move around a bit over the course of their lifetime, though that would be pretty universal. Anyway, we got words to discuss, but first the languages, the names of which are also made up of words. We got Albanian, German, Greek, Hindi, Latvian, Northern Kurdish, Russian, Spanish, and Welsh, and we're adding back in Polish, Danish, French, Czech, Hebrew, and Maltese. I've taken 50 nouns that are a loan word in almost every language, and we're gonna see how gender is assigned. So I started with geography. That seemed like the thing people would be most likely to borrow. Unsurprisingly, there were a few clear trends. Africa, America, Australia, and Vienna were all overwhelmingly feminine because they end in the letter A. France was similarly rendered as Frankia or Francia in translation, Turkey as Turkia or Tercia, and Belgium as Belgia or Belgica. Now, this makes sense. Even ignoring them being loan words, words ending in A tend to be feminine. That's just the nature of Indo-Europe, and it's also mandatory in the Slavic languages. And these are all rendered as feminine in their native languages. Excluding Vienna, the German Wien is neuter, as are all of these words in both German and Danish. Additionally, they're all rendered as masculine in Hindi. Anyway, it's still feminine in the late Latin form that most of these words are taken from, so it fits just fine. All of these make sense. What doesn't make sense is Portugal. Portugal is masculine in Portuguese, Spanish, and French, and obviously Hindi, but then in every other language it's rendered as Portugalia. Why? Is it because it's a geography term? Well, no. London is masculine, rendered as London or Londino. Well, all of these are former provinces of the Roman Empire. Does this bring to light some compulsion to portray Rome with a harem of subject provinces? Obviously not, because Rome is also feminine. So what, you're telling me the Roman Empire was an awesome lesbian couple? That's pretty cool. Anyway, London is weird, which kind of gets to the heart of the confusion around loan wording. You would think this is some kind of easy game. If it ends in a vowel, feminine. If it ends in a consonant, masculine. That's how Russian does it, how Albanian does it, how Greek does it, how Latin did it, how French kind of does it, but not really, and how English almost exactly doesn't do it. But if it were only that simple, the word giraffe is another word I'd like to approach. The original form was the Arabic zirafa. Italian doesn't have a Z, so they loaned it as giraffa, which is ultimately what yields Polish giraffa. Ends in an A, so feminine. It also gave the French giraffe, because words can't end in an A in French. Well, they can, but that's the third person singular future indicative declension of an ER stem verb, so nouns don't end in A. More to the point, an A ending in Latin would give an A ending in Italian, and the silent E in French. Now, silent E endings are still feminine, but silent, so it gets loaned as the Russian giraffe. That ends in a consonant, so it's masculine. Do you see the issue? And that's what we're going to have fun unraveling. It's going to be marvelous. Each language has its own set of rules. What fun! But first, there are some general rules. First of all, Hindi is always masculine. Always. That certainly makes things easier in that department. Second of all, Northern Kurdish is always feminine, except for one word. Squid, which is rendered as calamar, is masculine for some reason. Third, a lot of words just end in a weak vowel because that's a pretty common way for words to end worldwide. This is rendered as E in Albanian, French, and German, and as A in Greek, Spanish, and the Slavic languages, all of which then become feminine. Though if French gets its grubby little hands on a feminine word first, the vowel falls silent and it enters the Slavic languages with a consonant ending. But I know what you're all wondering. What about Maltese? Well, Maltese pretty much loans everything from Italian and doesn't change the gender at all, so it's basically a Romance language. Except for this one word, which I now realize is a bad example. That means Africa, America, Australia, Rome, Turkey, Vienna, France, Belgium, Athens, school, banana, potato, tomato, and guava are all feminine, as well as cuttlefish, which is rendered as sepia. Now, just as A endings are quintessentially feminine Indo-European, S endings are quintessentially masculine. They are more rare, but cactus, circus, and virus are all masculine, except obviously in Northern Kurdish, and so is pineapple, which is loaned as ananas, except in German. We'll get to German. M endings are less common and also neuter, and oftentimes it drops off entirely to form an O ending, and sometimes the plural is more common, so that gets loaned and treated like a feminine A ending. Classic. But what about those O endings? Well, they're more complicated. Like I mentioned, masculine endings become O endings in Spanish and Italian and therefore Maltese, so these become masculine in Greek and all Slavic languages. O endings are are neuter. Albanian, French, German, and Welsh really can't seem to make up their mind. Video and radio are feminine, but piano and metro are masculine. But metro is feminine in Hindi. Well, you had one job. For the other endings, at least in languages that have regular endings, the meta seems to be neuter where possible and masculine otherwise, a pattern that holds true for cobalt, tungsten, which is loaned as wolfram, dragon, griffin, telephone, microscope, kangaroo, and bamboo. Though bamboo is also an S stem for some reason, and there's a K in Russian, that leaves 4 languages that are sharply confusing: Albanian, German, Greek, and Welsh. Greek is the easiest. It has a lot of clear patterns for endings. It's just that they end up loaning a very weird form of the word. A lot of this has to do with the fact that these words are originally from Greek, plus Greek has a long and complex history where they changed the lemma a lot. My question is, what the heck is up with boomerang? Let's look at the transliteration of this word. Yes, it is technically impalmerang, but mpa is how you do ba now that bea makes a v sound. But what's up with this ending cluster? Nga seems like a reasonable way to write nga, but in Greek gamma already makes that sound half the time, so it should be gamma gamma. But what's actually happening is, while impa makes a b sound, nka makes a g sound because gamma actually makes a g sound now, so in theory we have nga, but this only makes a g sound at the start of a word, so what we really have is boomerang nka. Anyway, Albanian is pretty normal. The only difference is that E with diaresis R is a feminine ending. In German, all geography terms are neuter, except for Turkey, which is Türkei, which is feminine, because everything that ends in I is feminine. In general, though, we can see the vaguest archetype of a pattern in German. Weak vowels are feminine, strong vowels and sonorants are neuter, and obstruents are masculine. And then there's ananas, which is feminine for some reason, I guess because it has an A near the end, but A endings are neuter anyways, and metro is also feminine, even though O endings are neuter. Hey, let's see what's going on in Welsh. Well, in Welsh, tomato and Vienna are masculine and dragon and circus are feminine. Look, I know people clown on grammatical gender, and in native words it is pretty confusing, although with the freedom to assign gender to alone words, most languages have established a clear set of rules. Welsh is the only language that really seems like it picked randomly. I mean, the word for piano is neuter, and Welsh doesn't even have a neuter gender. It can be either. I mean, I understand it for animate nouns, but a piano? They don't talk. I mean, I used to know this lady called Piano, but she was pretty firmly a woman. I guess she did change her species, call that transhumanism, ha 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 ha. But gender transcends species. Well, most of them at least. I don't know if or